somebody was asking, what was that VAK stuff earlier? Well, it's to do with the notion that your mind has different languages. There are bits of the brain that talk visual language, the visual cortex stuff around here. There are bits of the brain that do auditory stuff, Broca's area, a bit lower down there. There are bits that do the emotional stuff, the amygdala and the emotional centres, even lower down underneath at the bottom. And those are different languages. In NLP, they call them representation systems because we represent information in visual, auditory, or when we think internally. So this is how we think, is actually in terms of inner images, self-talk, feelings. But that's how we experience the world, seeing it, hearing it, and feeling it underfoot. So it's the same systems, but internally, which is a neat trick. As a biologist, I go, wow, that's a neat way to create consciousness out of nothing. Just have a bunch of representations and off you go. But the interesting thing is when you look at people's eye movements, there are some patterns, that is, things that repeat. When people look up, they tend to be visualizing. Doesn't matter whether they're looking up that way, or straight ahead through you. Those are cues that they're probably visualizing at that microsecond in time, and that's all, but that's better than nothing. The same with eye movements flicking across to either side, but that's to do with auditory stuff. Could be sounds, could be music, could be speech, you can't tell, but it's not visual. And in case you're asking, well, what are the differences between VC and VR? Well, visual remembered is when you remember seeing something exactly the way you saw it. A lot of animals would do that. Horses have very good visual memory, I'm told, for when they've been somewhere they can remember it spot on. I can't. This is visual construct, and this is something that humans do that most animals are not very good at all. You can take an image, you can take your bedroom, you know what it looks like. You left it this morning, didn't you? Right, imagine a man's been in there with a purple and orange spray painter, and he's put diagonal stripes everywhere, walls, carpet, bed, ceiling. Imagine what your room looks like now. We call it imagination, and it gets us into a lot of good places, and it gets us into trouble occasionally. But it is constructing images that you haven't seen. Or one that really gets you into trouble, and don't do this one. Construct images of a loved one off doing loving activity with somebody else. It's called jealousy, and it'll cause you endless pain. Don't do it.
Unless you're left-handed or right-handed.
Now that gets interesting because, what is it, 10% are left-handers, something like that. And you would think, well, that's fine, they'd just have them crossed over, wouldn't they? No such luck, not with human beings. And what happens is you may get one that is simply crossed over, but then you get one that definitely isn't, and one that's doing something else weird. So with left-handers, actually with right-handers, you have to just get used to people, and after you've watched a few hundred eye movement patterns go by, you suddenly get clear. But I'm looking at somebody, I'm not even thinking eye movements, and I suddenly go, are they left-handed? And I look at their watch and, oh, blow me down. This is a left-hander. And I got it just from the eye movements, because some of them were reversed, but they're not always reversed. You really have to watch. There is a saving thing. Whatever somebody does with their eyes, they do it quite consistently. Even if it's a weird pattern, like visualizing down. Seriously rare, don't know if I've ever met one. But if somebody does visualize between their feet, they'll consistently visualize between their feet because it's what they learnt to do. But, yeah. But look, last one, and actually if you want the simple version of this, up is visual, down to this side is auditory internal dialogue. So this is when somebody's got their head on one side, so this is you, Eva, head on one side, hand on chin, called telephone position, is classic giveaway to internal dialogue at that moment in time. So eyes down that way, internal dialogue. Eyes down this way, kinesthetic. That's where people will often go to check out gut feel, or, you know, am I going to do this or not? Bottom line, emotional stuff, more often down that side. That simple three-part model is quite useful. It's so simple, it's easy to remember. You can get fancy versions, and there are some that are fancier than this. But when they get too complicated, I find they're not quite so useful. But that's the classic classic patterns you'll find in all of the books.